May 16th, 2021. The Toronto Raptors have just finished the regular season with their worst record in a decade, and for the first time in years, the Raptors organization looks uneasy. The widely considered greatest Raptor of all time, Kyle Lowry, is expected to leave. Pascal Siakam's future is in question, and the potential of a rebuild is looming as well. This was all until this man came along.
Running the floor. Here's Barnes, quick move, driving. Oh, the slam dunk.
Yes, in the space of 1 year, the Toronto Raptors' future has been transformed, and it's in large part due to the limitless potential of Scottie Barnes. Now, before we talk about the bigger picture in Toronto, let's just give you guys an indication of what makes Scottie Barnes so special. Let's set the scene. The Raptors are down 3-1 on the road in the first round of the playoffs. Philly have just gone on a run with the crowd now well into the game. So what does Toronto do? They of course give the ball to their rookie forward to run the offense. And well, a crossover and lob to Thad Young is executed to perfection. The next possession, a turnover, and a no-look pass to Precious Achiuwa. These were just two highlight plays from a game in which Scottie played 40 minutes just days after he was on the sidelines with what looked like a very serious ankle injury. And those plays right there are just a tiny window into the potential and ability of Scottie Barnes. However, let's rewind things first, because it wasn't always like this. Initially, when Barnes was drafted to Toronto, there was quite a lot of surprise, because draft experts had made it very clear that Jalen Suggs, yes, Jalen Suggs, was the clear number one option for that franchise and the heir apparent to the departing Kyle Lowry. This was made so clear, in fact, that there was not one post-draft grade that had the Raptors with a higher grading than the Magic. And well, it only took a standout performance from Scottie in the Summer League for people to realize Masai Ujiri's genius might have been on full display yet again. But I'm not about to bore you with Summer League. No one cares about that. What was important was, despite Scottie looking like he was ready to contribute and help this team, and despite them going back to Toronto, no one was giving them a chance of even making the playoffs. And if you don't believe me, this is from an article by Bleacher Report prior to the 2022 season, following the draft by the way, with Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, and Chris Boucher. The Toronto Raptors return a solid, relatively young core for the post-Kyle Lowry era. No mention of Scottie Barnes, but with apologies to Siakam, it's hard to find a surefire face of the franchise level talent. And this seemed like the consensus. The Raptors were okay, but they neither had a face of the franchise, nor were they good enough to be a playoff team in the Eastern Conference. So for the Raptors to go from a team that wasn't predicted to be in the playoffs, a team that wasn't in Bleacher Report's top 10 young cores entering the 2022 season, to now a year later finishing with the 5th seed and being 7th on that list of the best young cores in the league, that's some kind of achievement, and a lot of it's down to Scottie Barnes. And Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr., Fred VanVleet, Precious Achiuwa, and some other guys, but it's Scottie Barnes. Where do we even start with Scottie? If you think back to the beginning of the season, it took only 2 games. 2 games for him to prove that he was so much more than the player he had been projected out of college. Because just for reference, this was the Ringer's scouting report. Scoring from the perimeter appears foreign for him. He's an interior-based scorer who lacks the dribbling moves to break down defenders for jumpers, and he looks uncomfortable shooting, even from a standstill. Basically, his jumper was broke, he couldn't score from the perimeter, he was a defensive-minded player. Paraphrasing a little bit, but that's kind of what they were saying, and that didn't age well, because in just his second game against the Celtics, he put up 25 and 13, and he did so by stepping into threes, hitting pull-up middies, and looking like a flat-out offensive weapon with even some no-look dimes as well. And this is what makes Scottie such a captivating player, because at every point in the season, you can point to a part of his game in which he improved drastically, And that all started by showing off a mid-range game that was levels above what was thought of him. But then inevitably, as people do, they started to talk about his lack of three-point shooting. So what did Scottie do? From November 20th through to the beginning of February, he shot 34% from three on nearly 4 attempts a game. It even got to a point where he was hitting shots like this at the end of games.
Kick it out for Barnes. Edwards there defensively. Step back. Oh, ridiculous!
And I think it was this game in particular where everyone started to question just how good he could be, because it was by no means his first standout game, but 23, 12, and 5 against the Nets, who yes, were actually a good team at that point in time, was absurd. However, what truly encapsulates the potential of Scottie is that prior to this game, not only was he shooting threes, not only was he giving you 20 a night, but he had recorded 2.5 blocks a game on average over a 7-game stretch prior to that breakout offensive performance, including a 5-block game against the Kings. And this does feel like a perfect time to make note of the defense, because whilst the offense looked so far ahead of schedule it wasn't even funny, defensively he had some hype. And to say he lived up to the hype, I think we can say that. Because if we're speaking in facts, no rookie defender was ranked more versatile than Scottie per basketball index, with him spending close to 20% of his defensive possessions on every different position. One possession he's guarding a 6-foot point guard, the next possession he's guarding a big. Take this play for example, where he's guarding Vucevic on a post-up with 2 minutes left in OT and forces a miss using his combination of strength and length. And then in a different game, he's chasing around Drew Holiday and forcing turnovers. Or sometimes, he even does both, like on this possession where he hedges the Halliburton pick and roll before pinning his floater against the backboard. Now this defensive versatility was a particularly crucial part of his game and the Raptors' success, because they were lacking at the center position. Their core 5 of Pascal, Barnes, Van Vliet, Gary, and OG didn't have a notable center, but they still managed to go 15-6 when healthy, which by the way is a 71% win rate, which would have been second in the league behind the Phoenix Suns. So they're pretty good when healthy, but they were so effective because of the elite defense they had, led by the switchability of OG, Pascal, and Scottie, who were just as capable guarding 5s as they were guards. And what other rookies could you have plugged into that system and been like, go guard Luka Doncic for a night, go guard Drew Holiday for a night, oh, go up against Nikola Vucevic. He's doing that every single night. Who else is doing that? Actually, let's go one step further, because who else is doing that, but also being a playmaker for this team in transition and even in the half-court offense? Because forget about the glimpses he showed as a scorer, as a mid-range shooter, as a jump shooter, but the ability for him to handle the ball and playmake in the pick and roll was, in the 95th percentile of all players, which is absolutely absurd, and it makes sense when you see him making plays like this consistently. But in addition to his ability as the primary playmaker out of the pick and roll, he's also incredibly effective out of the short roll as a roll man, using his scoring gravity inside to draw the defense before dumping it off to the cutters like Achua or Pascal, or even kicking it out to the shooters like Achua or Pascal. Finding ways to contain someone that can do all of this as a playmaker, but can also finish in a multitude of ways around the rim with floaters, hooks, or just flat out dunking on opponents, which he did plenty of. And it was his influence as both a playmaker and as a defender that brought this team back to life. Because no doubts they were better than the 12th seed the year prior, but his ability to play any kind of role for this team just elevated them so much. And if you still doubted his influence after a dominant regular season, well, the playoffs would have quieted all of those doubts. Because in Game 1, despite the Raptors being blown out, he was the best player on the floor for Toronto, 15, 10 and 8 in a debut with the best plus-minus of all starters, and he just looked so poised out there. And despite the game being lost early, it looked like Scottie was going to be a huge reason they might still have a chance in the series, and that was until...
But his team is down down big here in game one, and Barnes just got hurt as well.
So after what looks like a serious ankle injury, he had to watch his team get blown out in game 2 before then losing game 3, and at 3-0 down with 2 of those 3 being blowouts, you kind of would have just expected him to sit out the next game or 2 and get ready for next season, but he wasn't about to do that, because he came off the bench in game 4 and contributed a little bit, but he then started and played the next 2 games, including game 5, where he played 40 minutes in a win, including those dimes that I showed you, putting up 12, 8, 4, and 3, and even giving all of us NBA fans some hope that Philadelphia might blow a 3-0 lead. That wasn't the case, however, but to return from injury, despite being 3-0 down, and then play fantastically in games 5 and 6, should have given Raptors fans so much confidence in what he can do going forward. In fact, as a starter, which was 3 of those games, he averaged 15, 8, and 5. Very impressive numbers when you consider over the last 15 years, only 2 other rookies have managed that stat line in the postseason. Ben Simmons is one, and Derrick Rose is the other. And if you just want to look at this season, the players who averaged at least that stat line have all been an all-star at least once in their career. He did that as a rookie, but I've told you guys everything that has made this fit perfect for Toronto on the floor. However, the true reason Scottie Barnes has changed the complete complexion and future of the Raptors franchise is he has made it possible for Toronto to do what made them champions 2 years ago, and that is retool when the time is right. Some think the time is right with Kevin Durant kind of available, but with Scottie still only 20, OG still developing, and the likes of Gary Trent Jr., Fred, and Pascal all in their 20s, and Precious Achiuwa. Actually, just shout out to Precious Achiuwa. Let's just realize that he was absolutely cooking Joel Embiid in the playoffs off the dribble, and also the second half of the regular season, he turned into Steph Curry from 3. That man has some serious potential that I don't think gets mentioned enough. And with him, alongside the face of the franchise, which is now Scottie/Pascal Siakam, they can determine their moves based on his development over the next couple of years, and they don't need to rush into anything, but they still have the chance to pull the trigger and turn into a championship team when need be, which saves them from the unenviable position of being directionless, like so many teams have often found themselves. Now, why would you assume I'm automatically talking about the Knicks or the Kings? Maybe. Anyways, if you did somehow make it to the end of this video, if you could drop a like, subscribe to the channel, have a great day.